The biggest challenge that I see across the world, because we are working with actually multitude of the countries, is lack of standardization on one side, but on the other side, a lot of companies, service providers, airlines, even airports, they're trying to do the SOPs personalized to the clients. But how many SOPs can you actually create? And what is the essence of the SOP? It's a standard operating process, which then is completely losing its meaning. So I think this creates more tension and more pressure to all service providers.
Supply chain intricacies of medical devices. And it's going to be a great session. May I invite our esteemed moderator, Mr. Vikas Pawar, co-founder and COO, Exsegen Genomics, to kindly come on stage, please. Mr. Binu Vijay Kumar, General Manager, Supply Chain, Thermo Fisher Scientific, may I invite you on stage, please. Miss Yulia, Celetaria, Head of Logistics, EarlyHealth Group, may I invite you on stage, please. Warm welcome to you, Miss Yulia Celetaria. Mr. Nigel Dsouza, National Manager, Business, Healthcare Solutions and Strategic Partnership, Aramex. May I invite you on stage, Mr. Nigel Dsouza. And finally, Mr. Sanjeev Madhavi, Chief Innovation Officer, Kale Logistics Solutions. May I invite you on stage. So I'll ask Mr. Pawar, Mr. Vikas Pawar, to kindly take over from here.
Thank you. Hello. Yeah, so we have to ensure that Sanjeev catches his flight. So, anyways, so this is going to be an interesting session. We're going to talk about medical devices while this is a pharma summit. But if you look at the symbology here, while there is a vaccine dosage inside, that is encapsulated in a syringe. Yeah. So medical device by itself is a large spectrum. It's about a $600 billion industry worldwide. India is a smaller part. 80% of our imports, our devices are generally imported. So given that context, we'll start. So my panel, I'm very honored. There's a diverse set of people here, each one really doyen of their domain. And we bring in a very good perspective, I think, of from the technology side, regulatory side, clinical trial side, as well as the medical devices side. So this will be interesting. I just hope that there are more audience here. But anyways, hope the audience comes back. But we'll start with Binu. Binu is basically, he's got 20 years of experience with Thermo Fisher Scientific and Kodak. My first question would be to Binu. Just let's start out with what are the typical challenges, like, from Thermo Fisher Scientific perspective, one of the largest medical devices, one of the top 5 perhaps. What are the challenges day-to-day you face? What are the operational challenges? What are the strategic challenges which you have day-to-day? If we can start with that. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So Vikas, so basically I would say that we are not directly a medical devices manufacturer. We are probably in ancillary services, probably blood banks. We have some specialty diagnostic business, and we also support some proteomics research in hospitals. So it's not basically impacting the patients directly, but yes, in specialty diagnostic, we do impact the people directly. But so the challenges are multifold. So we have internal as well as external challenges. From the external perspective, I'll give some examples as well, because regulatory challenges are very, very significant, and sometimes it's very, very peculiar to India. And many of the times, actually, the factories are not able to understand as well. For example, in the specialty diagnostics space that we operate, one of the requirements is that you cannot import a kit unless it has a 60% shelf life left. Right? It's a very typical, peculiar requirement only for India. This also means that we have significant challenges with the factory because they don't understand this across. For them, it's like whatever is the life left, you can sell it across anywhere in the world. And then you're stuck, right? So I can't procure it across unless the life is 60% left, and factory will not manufacture it unless their inventory goes to zero. So it's like a chicken and egg situation, or rather a choice between the devil and the deep blue sea, because if I procure in excess, then it goes into expiry, and if I don't procure it across, then I have a shortage. So it's I mean, you can't do away with it, but that's a reality that we are into at this point of time. Internally, obviously, we have a lot of challenges, and I would say one of the key challenges is probably the after-sales service. Thermo Fisher is a very innovation-driven company, and the average life cycle of a particular product is not more than 3 to 4 years. Right? So you will never achieve the kind of scale whereby you are able to predict what kind of requirements are going to come up. Right? So on an average, I would say that 50% of spare parts you're able to predict, 50% of the parts you're not able to predict. Right? So what happens is when these instruments go down, it's very painful. And the more expensive the instruments become, it becomes more painful to everybody else. Right? So there are challenges, and there are ways and means we have addressed it across, partly through mean time between failures and all those things. I'll cover that across later. But there are challenges, and apart from that, obviously we have a lot of manufacturing which is concentrated in specific geographies up till COVID actually. So we had a lot of supply chain challenges as well, manufacturing challenges as well. So after COVID, we have seen a lot of diversification happening, decentralization happening. Now, for most of the instruments, we have multiple manufacturing units, because of which, thankfully, the supplies have stabilized. So these are a couple of things which are internal and external. And I think the key here is the regulations are not going to change. But what is more important is you try to control and improvise on what you can control, right? What is in your hands. And that's why we rely a lot on continuous improvements. So that's what we do actually. So we try to control what is there in our hands.
Sure. Next, let me go to Yulia. Yulia, this is your first time in India?
Yes, it is.
So you've got experience, I think, in air cargo side, and then now you moved into clinical trial. You basically work with EarlyHealth, which is almost into 60 countries. So from your perspective, especially looking at clinical trials associated with medical devices, how do you see the differences across, and what are the lessons which we can learn from an Indian perspective? Because we heard in the previous calls, previous panels that India as a market is developing. So what are the lessons you think are important for a developing market to realize and basically leapfrog in terms of regulatory, in terms of technology, if you can?
Yeah, so my advantage, I think, is that I brought my 17 years of experience in cargo airline, Volga-Dnepr, air-bridge cargo, into clinical studies. So completely different side of the supply chain. And it gave me the opportunity to leverage this expertise and experience and to be able to build this resilient, I call them pharma corridors or clinical studies corridors. What is different or transporting clinical trials or biotech or any commercial pharmaceuticals to equipment, medical equipment? I don't think there is much difference. There's always going to be regulatory complexities regardless of the region and country. For clinical trials, however, there is absolutely zero room for any errors or mistakes, because you do have the named patient programs where the specific clinical study or product is designated to a specific patient, and when you lose it, there is no other product. So you have to do the importation and all of the process from the very beginning. The biggest challenge that I see across the world, because we are working with actually multitude of the countries, is lack of standardization on one side, but on the other side, a lot of companies, service providers, airlines, even airports, they're trying to do the SOPs personalized to the clients. But how many SOPs can you actually create? And what is the essence of the SOP? It's a standard operating process, which then is completely losing its meaning. So I think this creates more tension and more pressure to all service providers, to everybody within the supply chain. And supply chain is such a fragile ecosystem. And when we have too much pressure on one side, it just affects the whole supply chain, the whole chain in general. And chain of custody is another big challenge, I think, because for clinical studies, we do need to deliver it sometimes to very rural, far territories and areas to the patients, because patients do not always live around nice Mumbai airport, Singapore airport, Frankfurt airport. We need to deliver it really far. And that's creating, of course, we need to make the choice of the thermal packaging. We need to make the choice of the service providers to do the proper lane risk assessment. And I'm emphasizing it all the time since my airline times and now, that proper lane risk assessment is the key to success.
Great. Thank you. So we move on to Nigel. Nigel heads the solutions for healthcare for Aramex. So from your perspective, while Yulia said that SOPs for each customer, you have a customer-facing role. Okay, so how do you differentiate? How do you actually look at customer requirements and then try to map up with what can be done, what cannot be done? What are the general challenges you face in the from a client perspective? Yeah.
Thank you for that question. So I'll pick on the most important, or the cost factor, which has been spoken of right since the morning today, and quite interesting because I'm just back from a client meeting which was along the same lines. Now I'll give you an example, not taking the name of the customer. It's a medical device company. They're looking to import into India, and as we all know, customs governs a lot of those aspects, right? So now when you bring in a complete component into India, there's a certain percentage of duty structure. And when you bring it in components, there's a certain structure again. Now, we go into any discussion with a customer as a project. We never call it a transaction. And the importance that Aramex puts onto it is to understand in entirety its requirement. I'll go back to what Mr. Jani said in the morning. He said pharma logistics is an intelligent supply chain, right? So cost being one of the topmost factors. So what we went to the customer, sat at the table and said, the entire component that you're bringing in, one is voluminous. So there's a lot of volumetric weight. Two is with the HS code that it now has as a complete component, there's a very high degree of custom duties. Can we break it down into components? One. What happened therein is when you broke it down into components, the HS code for each component changed. It reduced the custom tariff. Furthermore, we could put it into a much smaller package. So the customer won on two fronts. Of course, we lost because it's a lesser weight for us, but we won a customer with the solution that we provided them. So it was a cost reduction in terms of volume. It was a cost reduction to them in terms of custom duties tariff. So I think when we go into any engagement, we actually look at it holistically and an entire perspective, not just one aspect of it.
Great perspective. So we move to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, you've had years of experience. You're currently the Chief Innovation Officer at Kale. So from your perspective, how much of a role technology plays and how much of role technology will play? We do see a lot of things happening in the technology field to support medical devices. What is your perspective in terms of how that is going to develop, how it is now, and how is it going to develop?
Thank you, Vikas. I think just to clear a bit of a background, I've actually spent close to 20 years in supply chain and logistics planning from the operational side. And then, of course, I was managing technology alongside. So I can actually speak on both the sides of the spectrum. Having said that, what we're very clear about is breaking down logistics. It's move and store until it reaches the customer from the point of origin. And what we're looking at from a technology aspect here is to give you those aspects around three areas. One is about automating these tasks so that they can all be continued and completed in a chain. Second, and more importantly, is around the visibility of what happens on the ground. Where exactly is my material? Because as I keep mentioning in all the logistics conferences, what's the $1 million question that all of you in the room who are shipping your material have? Where's my stuff? Where is my stuff? And as long as you can answer that $1 million question, you are in good faith with the customer. So transparency, monitoring is the second more, I would say, prominent pillar. Third, we always come to that. That's obviously the cost element. Everything has to be cost effective. So it's a combination of speed and cost, and whichever comes first. But having said that, technology today is no different from what it was 20, 25 years ago when I started my journey in logistics. At those times, we still had innovation. We didn't have real-time track and trace. But nevertheless, we used to tout our truck drivers, 100 rupees extra so that you can go to every single place where you stop for the night and give me a call from your PCO. And that used to be a track and trace for us. Of course, we've now moved to a place where we need real-time track and trace. And of course, the best example we always quote is, if an ant were to bite your toe, your immediate reaction is to shake it off with your hand. But that meant that the signal from the toe had to go through the leg to your brain, to your hand, and ask it to do something. Now, that is the level of real-time supply chains that we talk about today. And logistics is no different. Logistics is the aspect of supply chain where we are providing transportation and warehousing services to our customers. So having said that, technology-wise, automation, monitoring, and more importantly, as I said, cost effectiveness. Those are the three pillars that we're working on. You can talk every technology today. People will talk of AI, people will talk of ML, all the related technologies. But having said that, we are living in a very dichotomous world today, and I'm sure my panel colleagues will agree. On one hand, we have people who are completely digitized and are very much at the forefront of digital supply chains. And yet, we have several industry players who are very much on the other end of the spectrum. And we're looking at trying to bring the industry somewhere in the middle, saying, get some automation done, get some monitoring there, try to improve your cost effectiveness and optimization, and then you slowly move up the ladder. So for us, I think it's a very interesting journey. 3 decades in logistics, we still have the same question today as what it was before. And we're still trying to answer the same questions through technology.
Great. So I'll go back to Binu. I think when we talk about large organizations, at least in different verticals, we talk about collaborative logistics, collaborative supply chain. Is that some concept which Thermo Fisher looks at? Is it possible? How do you look at that as a concept for medical devices?
So I hear a lot about cost here, right? So, and this is something that I've experienced personally, actually. So when you look at it in a holistic perspective, that particular cost that we talk about with the service providers, let's say, that becomes insignificant, right? And we have experienced that across. I'll give an example. And it's all about collaboration with your service providers. It's all about collaboration with your warehousing partners. It's all about collaboration with your everybody else. But what is more important is, does everybody share the vision, right? So is your priority their priority as well? I'll give an example. I spoke about spare parts earlier, right? So on an average, a spare part when it used to come to the warehouse, it used to wait 5.5 days to get GRN, so that it's available to the customer. 5.5 days. The shipment used to come from the factory to the warehouse in 3 days' time, and it used to wait in the warehouse for 5.5 days to get GRN. Just imagine the state of the customer. So what happened was basically the collaboration. We had a relationship with the warehousing partner, and it was a purely transactional kind of a relationship that we had. But over a period of time, we started working with them on projects, and they started believing what we can achieve. And over a series of a lot of continuous improvement projects, I think eventually it came down to almost 1.5 hours from 5.5 days. It's all a matter of your service, your partners believing in your goals, what you want to achieve. And I'm sure a lot more can be achieved. The cost is a very small component, right? So as long as the companies, organizations are willing to look at the larger picture, how you can make an impact on the customers, the transportation cost, the clearing costs, and all those things are insignificant.
Okay. Great. Coming back to Yulia, we see a lot of talks about digital technologies and remote monitoring of patients in clinical trials. So from a clinical trial perspective, how do you see does that mean that the need for logistics will reduce? How do you see that impacting the future, at least from a clinical trial perspective? Do you see that remote monitoring might take away some of the market share from us, or?
No, I don't think so. We do see that the market is getting sometimes even a little bit oversaturated with digital platforms, devices that are monitoring temperature, humidity, everything else, AI tools that help you track and trace, and just general visibility. However, we also see that a lot of times these platforms are not really co-integrated between each other. So in one part of the world it is working, in another one it's barely working or is not really covering part of the custody or part of the supply chain or part of the transportation. So I think that is creating a lot of problems. I don't think that, what I do think is that we are, of course, on a proper way to develop the digital supply chain. And this digital supply chain needs to include the proper control tower. Because I do speak with a lot of service providers, airlines, freight forwarders, road transportation, and they are explaining to me how fantastic their control towers is. And then when I ask the questions, what is a control tower? Sometimes it's an Excel spreadsheet that they have to manually fill out. That is not the control tower. That is really manual work, more manual work than it's necessary. So I do think that emerging technologies it's already here. So we just have to accept it. But we need to be a little bit more careful with them and really try to make sure that they are properly co-integrated between different parties and stakeholders within the supply chain.
Great. I'll come to Nigel. From Aramex perspective, because you've kind of transitioned, again, we had this talk about more of express logistics, and then you've gone into freight forwarding. How's that journey helped you, especially in the medical devices side? And what do you see, what do you see the future, while you were saying that you're aggressive about freight forwarding side? How do you see the future for your division, especially from medical devices side, from a healthcare side?
Thank you for the question. So actually, it's good to be last sometimes. Aramex has got into healthcare after the big three, which is FedEx, DHL, and TNT. Fortunately, I worked with all of them, so a lot of learning from there came in here. So we started by saying, let's not make the mistakes of the past. Aramex is unfortunately still known as Express, as you rightly mentioned, but we are very strong in freight. We have been in India for 26 years. We've had a foray in freight for around 12 years now, and we are just building on that. How it helps us is Aramex is a known brand. So when I go in with another service or another product, I don't need to actually introduce much. It's just a new product offering that I need to get into. Apart from that is we have built the network. So it's my second inning in Aramex and my fourth year now, but we used the first 2 years to actually build the product. And we did it in a very structured way. So we said, one is freight it's not known per se. So let's go with a very proper plan. So what we did is very proud to say that we got our GDP certification. Since we're talking medical devices, we got an ISO 1385 certification. Now, that's what helps us get into the market. So we are not coming right now into India and saying, hey guys, I'm a freight forwarder as well, and I can move stuff for you. We are saying, we have learned the business. Here are my certifications. My processes are defined. And just to put it out there, we've got a warehouse in Bhiwandi. It's a 2.5 lakh square feet warehouse. We've got a 25,000 square feet CRT room. And that entire facility is manned by around 600 cameras. So we want to put the seriousness out there that we understand, like someone mentioned in the earlier session, theft, damage. So, it's out there. We've seriously got into the business, understood what the vertical needs, built our solutions accordingly, along with certifications. And I think now very forcefully, we can get into the market and say, yes, we are a freight company. Please don't look at us as express only. And we are here to stay, and we are serious, and hence our solutions, our processes are defined as per the GDP and ISO norms.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I heard regulatory move up, these challenges. Now, from a technology perspective, Sanjeev, how does your technology actually take care of these regulatory compliances? Because we believe that technology is an enabler for future. Now, how does your technology look at regulatory compliance, and how does it actually work? Because you work with numerous airports, ports. So how does your technology help in overcoming this challenge of regulatory compliance?
So I think the first thing, Vikas, is to understand that we are operating on both the sides of the spectrum. As we have logistics service providers, our freight forwarding friends, shipping lines, cargo agents, brokers, and everyone in that chain. And of course, on the other side, we have the logistics service users, the shippers, manufacturers, pharma companies, whom we have represented today here. We have to provide solutions on both the sides of the spectrum. So again, the first and foremost element that I would want to address is from Yulia. She actually rightly pointed out. We have the concept of control tower. It's been running for the last 30, 32 years. I've been implementing control towers for the last 27 years across 15 countries so far, and with multinationals as such. What you have to understand is now, I think the concept which is now emerging is it's not a control tower, it's a collaborative tower. And for a good reason. Your circle of control is limited to what you can see. So if I am a pharma company and I'm creating a control tower, it's natural that I expect my vendors and my suppliers, as much as my service providers, to also have their control towers, which they do. Everyone today is trying to create a control tower, which means you're going to have one control tower talk to at least another 10, maybe 15, maybe 20, depending on how big your supply chain ecosystem is. So when you're trying to deal with this kind of a control tower chain, we are then establishing what we call as a community. So the establishment of what we call as a community platform, which means you're trying to bring several of these control towers together to offer you a larger area of control, a larger area of visibility. Now that visibility spans on three spectrums. As I said, first and foremost is goods. And I'm sure that's very rightly pointed out. I need to figure out where my stuff is and how it is, whether I'm going through any temperature excursions or any other sort of deviations from the norm. The second and more importantly is the compliance and regulatory norms that we have in multiple countries. And whenever we have cross-border trade and cross-border shipments, regulatory compliance comes foremost, because again, the local laws and the regulations that are governed in India vis-a-vis what happens to it in US, vis-a-vis say in South Africa or in Europe, we are facing our clients everywhere. We're working very, one of our pioneer customers is, a German conglomerate who was actually in the medical devices space. So they were our first pioneers to start with the control tower concept. And what they did was, we are not going to establish a control tower only in India. They established it over 15 countries through their APAC and their Middle East and North African sort of presences, across the different countries. Now, what that helps them is they're trying to control their supply chain through an integrated discussion of compliances, documentation and control, monitoring of goods on the ground, as well as through the supply chain. And it's all integrated within their own company sort of systems. Now, add to that you're going to have your service providers, right? Nigel over here, we'll have our fellow, shipping lines to freight forwarders to airlines, to everyone jump into that control tower and provide you more and more information, all the way down to the IoT device, which is actually on the box for you to even monitor the temperature and the pressure, as may be the case. The kind of information that you're now gathering is immense. So the next challenge you're trying to look at is how can this information move as seamlessly as possible to the regulatory agencies in each of these countries ahead of the shipment arriving there. So pre-shipment notification for them to see how customs clearance processing can happen as fast as possible, so that the goods are not left on the ground, like how Binu mentioned. We don't need to have a 5-day GRN process happen just because somebody forgot to tie the next process into automation. So that kind of overall visibility at a country level, then at a maybe a continent level, and then at the global level is what we are achieving to control towers. And it's as much as our pharma companies were achieving it, as much as our service providers, airlines, airports, everyone. Mumbai airport is a classic example. They've been using our community systems for monitoring all the shipments that are going through. I'm sure that'll include a lot of pharma goods as well. So what kind of processes are there? How are they automated? How are they digitized? Is the data flowing completely digital? Do we need to have a touch of paper anywhere? Does anyone need to see if even the goods can be moved without any human interface? If that can be achieved, we can then guarantee complete transparency and trust to even our final customers. Say it's a complete hands-off shipment, as well as the documentation is completely digital. That's the vision that we're all aiming for.
Yeah, I think we can open up the floor for questions. Yeah.
I just had a question on medical device, and because I'm not clear, I'm asking you this question is, we are sourcing, one of my clients is sourcing insulin pens without the cartridge and without the syringe. So does it qualify under a medical device, or is it just a plastic pen? It has no cartridge and it has no syringe. And if I want to import, will it be considered as a medical device or just a plastic component pen? I'm asking you because we are stuck with this 1 week. So I'm just taking advantage of the forum here. Anybody from the shippers, importers, service provider, anybody who can answer me.
Can I answer that, please?
Yeah, please. Yeah, thanks.
So what would happen is the HSN code would define what category it falls in. So for the component in question, if the HS code can be identified, we would then understand under what chapter it falls, and then whether it's a medical device or just a component or an accessory.
But Nigel, you know how customs is. They will take the worst HNZ code and then put it on us, So it's not about a sample, but tomorrow when I import 300,000 and 500,000, I should not be in a soup. That is the, according to me, as per Drug and Cosmetic Act, it is not a medical device because it has no syringe, no cartridge. It is just a plastic pen, but it has a dosator device. Mm-hmm. But I'm not 100% clear whether it is a medical device or it is not.
Well, I can answer that differently is, let me be your importer and your freight forwarder, I'll solve it for you.
I'll keep this in mind for sure.
I'll take you up on that. Thank you.
No, but interpretation of the HSN code, I think that remains a big challenge for almost just not medical devices anywhere. I mean, I can speak by example that we were working with one large technology firm where we were basically importing something where they were licensing their players, their partners in India. And they were just providing basically at the reception, they were like, there was a kind of a cloth which used to hang saying that they are the certified partner. Okay. So now what do we say? Like, the CD is along with the CD with the annual, renewal is there and the cloth. So what is the thing? Is it software or is it basically a piece of cloth? How do you justify? And there was interpretation which said that we should do it as a cloth, and we went ahead with it, and there was no challenge. So it's always very subjective with this.
One more thing, if I just want to get a sample, is it okay to go through a DHL courier, or it has to be booked through a cargo and all? Because my import guys scared me saying, don't bring through DHL, get it through cargo, it is better. So is there any hassles on that?
No, if it's just a sample with a low value, I can tell you Aramex can bring it for you. So please use my service.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll get it. Thank you.
I'll give an example on the HSN code piece actually. So, but it's not a medical example. I'll give a mass spectrometer example. A mass spec falls into an HSN code which is 9027 something, which has a basic duty exemption, right? Now, if I bring that as an instrument, now instrument has 10 components into it. Each of them might have a different HSN code. If I bring all of them together, right, then basic duty is exempted. If I bring it at a line level, then each item would go into a different HSN code, different percentage, right? Even if it is non-assembled, eventually it's going to the same instrument. Now, the spare part for that, when I'm importing that particular component separately, a spare part for that, it falls into a different HSN code. So there is, you can't, as long as you're importing a component of the instrument separately, there is no way that you will be able to get that exemption from the customs. For example, if it's a pump is an integral part of a mass spec. When it comes along with the instrument, it is a part of the instrument. If you bring it separately, it will still go into the mass spec. But it will go into the HSN code of pump and you'll have to pay 10%, 12% customs duty. So,
the other way you can look at it is you can look at predicate device, which is like a device which is similar, and how is the HSN code, you can find how is it typified in other parts of the world, And then you can say that, like, I'm using that as and like, it needs to be of a significant volume so that is something which you can look at. Yeah.
And just on that sample question, it's not just a sample. I think our experience with, we use DHL actually, DHL Express. But our experience with DHL Express and companies like DHL Express has been very, very good in terms of, and it's not just related to small shipments. We bring in a lot of huge shipments with them. So I think they carry a lot of capabilities, and it's not just left to samples, but I think you can bring in a lot bigger shipments with the companies like DHL Express and Aramex. They have a lot more capabilities, but I'm not sure why people still consider them as courier companies, smaller shipments. But I think we have a huge number of shipments which is coming from DHL Express.
I'll just add
just to add to that, I'm sorry to cut you there, Nigel. Again, companies like DHL have not evolved out of nowhere. I mean, I've been part of DHL for the last 20 years, and again, the point is there is a separate health division within DHL.
Absolutely.
So they are there to look at all the harmonization of the HS codes. And as I said again, not just that, even within Carley and DHL, we actually have representation where we are talking at the UN CFAC levels to see how there can be rationalization of tariffs. We're looking at regularization of all the compliances, harmonization across the globe, across many of the territories wherever we have FTAs and stuff. So again, the point is, as an association or as a movement, if I call it so, there has to be some kind of a representation made to these global councils. And that is exactly where people will formulate rules as well as compliance norms. And I think that is one channel that we should explore strongly, because again, we are just going down to the local level, and the local levies are always at question. But having said that, there is always a precedence, as they call in law. There is always a precedence. This is following somebody else who is following somebody else. And you cannot actually go back to the original in any case, because you will never be able to find that. So again, a precedence has to be changed and a precedence has to be affected. So again, it's good to affect the change in the future. We definitely want to see that happen here as well.
So I think just a final wrap up where we are talking about regulatory technology and demand and distribution. Just about 30 seconds, each of us can actually talk about what excites you about the medical devices supply chain. Like, what keeps us going basically?
I think for us, it's the mission actually that drives us. Basically, Thermo Fisher believes in making the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. So we try. So that's the mission that drives us, and that's what keeps us excited. The regulatory challenges will continue to remain. There is no escape from that. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of things that we internally can do to make a difference to the customers, make a difference to the organizations that we serve. So we should always keep on looking on what we can do internally rather than actually, because regulatory is going to remain. I mean, there's no escape from that.
What excites me, I think, to see that regardless of at which part of the supply chain you are, I don't think it excites me, but it fascinates me that regardless of the supply chain part you are in, you will have exactly the same problems, exactly the same headaches. And I think this is our mission as even the cross industry to try to minimize those risks, to find the better contingency plans, because we know now very well that if you have plan A and B, it's good, but it's not good enough because you need to have way more plans in the pipeline. So yeah, and I think even cross industry, we can learn a lot from perishables, automotive, fashion, and really to have these open dialogues, not only within the healthcare or pharmaceutical logistics supply chain.
Two things I'd like to say. So one is, I think we're in the right place, right time when we talk about healthcare and life science. So yes, as an organization, we want to be a catalyst to help manufacturers, users to bring in or send out these products. And I will say from the fraternity that I am in logistics is to all the manufacturers, importers, please include us in your discussions, because I've had 30 years of experience and I'm still learning. But in logistics, we know how to support you when we know what your requirement is. So I think it was said in the earlier sessions as well, it should be inclusive. We need to understand what your requirements are, and then definitely we can work out a solution. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Sanjeev?
Yeah, so I think for us, logistics remains the most dynamic industry of them all. Planning, execution, monitoring, as well as decision making is intertwined very, very closely, right from an hourly level to an annual to a 5-year bucket, right from strategizing networks to seeing our partners and executing day-to-day deliveries. But having said that, the biggest, I would say, the opportunity in logistics remains that the world's a village now. It's a global marketplace. We have opportunities of serving our customers from probably from one far end of the globe to the other far end of the globe. And most importantly, unlike 20, 30 years ago, where it used to be a speed or a cost choice, we are now moving to an era through the digital supply chains and logistics that we have both of them as a choice. It can actually be speed and cost together, and that is the fundamental, I would say, challenge or opportunity that we are all trying to look at. I want logistics at the right speed with the right cost effectiveness, and hopefully today we have the wherewithal to deliver that through the technology that we're using for better decision making and for better cost controls.
All right. Thank you. So I think that would be our panel session.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. May I request you to give a big round of applause to our wonderful moderator and all our speakers.